Hello and welcome back to Study More Hygiene. Today I want to talk about occlusal relationships in centric occlusion. So the first thing I have set up here is our normal occlusion. So let's first look at the molar relationship of those first molars. So the mesial-buccal cusp of the maxillary first molar occludes with the mesial-buccal groove of the mandibular first molar. So let's take a look at that. So here's our maxillary first molar. The mesial-buccal cusp of that maxillary first molar fits in with that mesial-buccal groove of the mandibular first molar. And then let's look at the canine relationship. So the maxillary canine occludes with the distal half of the mandibular canine and the mesial half of the mandibular first premolar. So again, we have our maxillary canine, which occludes with the distal half of the mandibular canine. So which it is doing, it's occluding there. And the mesial half of the mandibular first premolar. So it's kind of hidden that mandibular first premolar there. Slightly, as we can see, the mesial portion. And then there is no anterior relationship, no dental malalignments present, such as crowding or spacing. So we would call this normal occlusion. Now, let's discuss a class 1 malocclusion. So the molar relationship would stay the same. So the mesial-buccal cusp of the maxillary first molar occludes with the mesial-buccal groove of the mandibular first molar. So this stays the same. The canine relationship is the same as above, so same as the normal occlusion. So the maxillary canine can occlude with the distal half of the mandibular canine and the mesial half of the mandibular premolar, but malpositions of individual or groups of teeth may occur. So again, these teeth can slightly shift, such as misalignment, such as crowding or spacing. So we would call this a class 1 if there was some crowding or spacing here, if any of these front teeth were shifted due to overcrowding or spacing issues. So now I want to talk about class 2 division 1, which has a distal occlusion. So the mesial-buccal cusp of the maxillary first molar occludes by more than a width of a premolar, mesial to the mesial-buccal groove of the mandibular first premolar. So what that's saying is that in this first molar relation, these first molars will be ahead, about 1 premolar's worth of length. So the mesial-buccal cusp of the maxillary first molar occludes mesial to the mesial-buccal groove of the mandibular first molar. So we can see it's a little bit ahead there. In the canine relationship, the distal surface of the mandibular canine is mesial. So the distal surface of the mandibular canine is mesial to the mesial surface of the maxillary canine by at least a width of 1 premolar. So we're getting this sort of action. So let me read that again. The distal surface of the mandibular canine is mesial to the mesial surface of the maxillary canine by at least a premolar's width. So it's going to be ahead. People end up looking like that. Anterior relationships. Maxillary anteriors protrude facially from the mandibular anteriors with a deep overbite. So patients will be looking like that. So it's a deep overbite here. So now let's go back. Let's talk about class 2 division 2. So the molar relationship would be the same as division 1. The canine relationship would be the same as division 1. The anterior relationship, so those maxillary anterior incisors are upright or retruded, and the lateral incisors are tipped labially or overlap the central incisors with a deep overbite. So again, even more extreme anterior overbite. I can show you from the front, so it's an extreme overbite. Again, we're calling this retrognathic. It's a retrognathic profile. So now I want to talk about class 3 occlusion. So in this class, the mesial-buccal cusp of the maxillary first molar occludes by more than the width of a premolar, distal to the mesial-buccal groove of the mandibular first molar. So what does that mean? So we're going to take our model, and that first molar is going to be pretty much behind that mandibular first molar. So let me say that again. The mesial-buccal cusp of the maxillary first molar is distal to the mesial-buccal groove, so it's behind it, of the mandibular first molar. And then the canine relationship, the distal surface of the mandibular canine is distal to the mesial surface of the maxillary canine by at least the width of a premolar. So again, that maxillary canine is going to be behind that mandibular canine by a premolar's width. And then the anterior relationship, those anterior teeth are in crossbite with each other. So they're in crossbite. And we call this a prognathic profile, looking like that. And then some other things I want to discuss. Let's talk about our classification of overbites. So right now we're at a normal level. That lower 1/3 of those anterior teeth is covered, or the top 1/3 of those lower anterior teeth is covered by those maxillary teeth. So we just call that normal. So now when we get into a moderate, it starts to cover the middle third of those bottom front teeth. So we're in a moderate overbite here. And then we have a severe overbite where those top front teeth pretty much completely cover the bottom front teeth. So that'd be a severe overbite there. And something else I can discuss with you is